So I'm Andrew Thiessen. I run a for-profit beekeeping company called Honey on Wales. Wales, like the country, Wales. I run about 40 hives full-time. I'd say 40 production hives, more or less. That's what I try to overwinter. And then the summer that can ramp up with, especially with nuke production, to kind of kissing 100 or so hives. Until, let's see, this is my 10th year beekeeping, and until about 3 years ago, my main focus was on honey production. Mainly because I had a lot of winter hive death, kind of average 30 to 40%, some years more. And so I never really had surplus bees to focus on nuke production. Whatever nukes I produced were for my own kind of rebuilding winter, recovering from winter loss. And then a few years ago, I have to give credit where it's due. I met a man named Jeff Hinson in Oakboro, North Carolina, and he taught me how to keep bees alive. And since I met him, I have not had a single hive die over the winter. So that's 3 years ago. So he changed my world, and now the focus is definitely on nuke production, producing nukes for sale. Simply that came about just to deal with the surplus of bees. My model was set up to deal with 30% loss, and suddenly when I didn't lose a single hive, what do you do with all these bees? You have to sell them. So, and that's really where my passion lies anyway. I don't care to run a bottling plant. I care to have my hands in the bees. I love queen rearing. That's my passion. And so, yeah, nuke production keeps you in the bees. Like a rich man's toy. Like, who's buying these things? That seems ridiculous. Like, for a hobby guy, you know what I mean? But then in her program, like here in North Carolina, in February, every year, in fact, it's the one thing that's reliable, we will get a rainy stretch. It may be a week, it may be the entire month. You don't know. It's going to get chilly and it's going to get rainy, and the bees have already started to build up. So at that point, monitoring hive weights is critical. If you're going to lose hives, that's when it's going to happen, during the month of February. And so that very first year, I had just incidentally, one of the hives that was on my 2 scales at that time, going into that chilly, rainy stretch in February, it had probably close to 20 pounds of stored honey. And then I happened to check the weights during that rainy stretch. It lasted a good while, probably close to 4 weeks. And the hive weight was what I knew to be that of a bone dry, empty box of drawn comb. So I knew, just from monitoring the hive weights, that hive was going to die if I didn't intervene right then. I knew sub-freezing temperatures were coming, and there was precipitation around that, chilly and wet. That hive, and it's probably not the anomaly in the yard, I had about 40 hives. So as it turned out, in rapidly weighing them all very quickly, that about half, so about 20 of the hives were dry. So they needed food, and so I was able to get food on them immediately, and they all survived. And I credit that 100% to monitoring the weight, which is something I never did. It never entered my mind to monitor the weights, to weigh a hive, until these electronic scales. So immediately I was made aware, wow, this is a critical bee management tool, not just for for-profit beekeepers, but for anybody who has a hive. If one hive survives, I'm selling honey retail, 100% retail, $15 a pound is what I sell my honey for. And my target here in Charlotte is about 150 pounds minimum honey production per hive per year. And so you could do the math. If you buy one scale, and it saves one hive, keeps it alive and producing honey versus dead, you just paid for almost 5 scales. Like this is the biggest return on investment in beekeeping, probably. These hive scales. I will never manage hives without hive monitors. It's absolutely critical to my operation. Love them. They're so usable, especially now, like with like the HM6, I believe I just got this spring. You know, you just walk up to the hive and grab the information. It's instantaneous versus kind of having to stand around a little bit. But yeah, it's fantastic. And so, like me trying to produce nucs for a deliverable date, especially who's buying nucs? New beekeepers. Once you've been keeping bees a little while, you know how to produce your own bees. So new beekeepers, they don't know about the effects or how closely we're tied into the effects of weather. And so when I promised them, yes, you know, tax day, April 15th, these nucs will be ready for you. But then we've had 2 or 3 cycles of warming up and then hovering right around freezing temperatures. It sets it back for 2 to 4 weeks. You do that a time or two, suddenly you start getting into chalk brood. The population's dwindling on the nucs instead of being overflowing with bees. It resulted in 2 more rounds of queen rearing for me to produce the number of nucs that I had sold, which normally a single round of queen rearing will do it, and for the first round of spring nucs. So yeah, it was fantastic to be able to take a screenshot of that graph of the data and send that out to people I know and nuc customers and say, look, this is why I can't deliver your nuc on this date, because you could see, you know, they were building up. We got that cold night, and now they've crashed. And so we need a string. We can look at the previous data. We know what it takes now to facilitate buildup. So we need a string of 2 or 3 weeks of these like above 50-degree temperatures to facilitate buildup, to get these nucs deliverable, which we never knew that before. Again, friends I have kept bees here 15, 20 years. They never understood how severely one single cold night would affect spring buildup. And then, of course, our honey crop is so short, 8 weeks, our honey season, roughly 6 to 8 weeks here in Charlotte. Growth is exponential, so if you get nailed in a population step back, you're not going to hit your target with honey production. It's not going to happen because you can never catch up in exponential growth. You know, it's like the stock market. If you start investing when you're 20 versus 40, even if you invest twice as much when you start at 40, you're never going to catch up. So, yeah, that's a thing we never knew, a picture we never knew existed, and now we have very clearly represented data on that. That's fantastic. Yes, so having that live weight represented is critical as far as managing for honey production. It lets us know exactly when the nectar flow starts in the spring versus before it was just kind of a guess. You know, you go into your hives, you go, oh, it looks like some honey's coming in, but you don't really know. Now we see it. It turns on like a faucet. They'll go from 1/4 to 1/2 pound per day per hive loss, and then suddenly they gain 3 pounds in one day, and then it ramps up from there, hopefully 10 to 15 pounds a day. You know, so we never knew that. It was always a guess until we had the data to actually look at, and that helps us. You still have to work bees. Of course you have to get your hands in the brood box and see what's going on there, but as far as knowing when to add additional supers, I run 8-frame gear, 8-frame deeps, and so I know there's about 30 pounds of honey, stored honey in a full box. So I know when I see it getting 20 to 22, 23 pounds gain from when I put that previous box on, I know that hive needs another box. And if I don't, then they're going to be on one of these tree branches behind me. So yeah, it definitely helps with that. And then when the nectar flow ends, again, they'll go from bringing in anywhere toward the tail end of the nectar flow, 5 to 10 pounds a day per hive, depending on hive strength and weather and all that, to suddenly they're losing half a pound a day. And well, there goes my paycheck. So it's I can buy sugar syrup buying sugar syrup is much more affordable than having them consume the honey. And I can sell honey, I cannot sell sugar syrup. So it lets me know exactly when I need to get boxes off to extract and start feeding. Yeah, it facilitates conversation. It's interesting. Like I'm active on Instagram at Honey on Whales, and that's a wonderful information sharing platform, and it definitely has facilitated conversation with people I never would have come in contact with. They see the data and they say, "Oh boy, Iran, the beekeeping has a long history in Iran, the Middle East." And a lot of Iranians follow me on Instagram, and it's wonderful because again they have hundreds of years of experience in keeping bees, if not thousands, and this data I get comments, like we never knew this. Holy cow, even hundreds or possibly thousands of years of experience, generations of experience, and these scales are painting pictures of activity that they never knew existed. We, as a beekeeping community, never knew existed. We thought we knew. We assumed we knew. Oh, my dad kept bees, my grandpa kept bees, so I know how to keep bees. But then you see it in data, and it's wow. We did not know that was happening. So it's. I think it's really like springboarded. A knowledge base forward and really kick the door open as far as, oh, if that's going on, then what about X or Z or whatever. It's taken people from being complacent, thinking they know what's going on in their hive, to wow, sometimes a little kick in the teeth is good for us. Makes us a little more active as far as getting in there and figuring out what's really happening, and then of course like how to maximize our return. We put a lot of hours into farming honeybees. It's like farming hogs or sheep or cattle or row crops or anything. Farming is incredibly labor intensive. If you can even get an incremental increase in your return, it's on a volume scale, that's huge. So yeah, it's it's an incredible tool. It really is, to the science of farming honeybees.